Okay, welcome to Startup Grind 2013, like the very first one here in Adelaide. I'm so stoked to be the first one with Stuart Snyder. Stuart co-founded local startup YourAmigo that just kicked massive goals, and I'm sure Stuart will get into some detail about that. And just over the last, for years, has been very keen to help build Adelaide's startup community. Very generous with your time, Stuart. Involved in E-Challenge, involved with Venture Dorm, down at Flinders, and this awesome startup grind. You do that one too.
I'm honored to be here, Mike.
Yeah. So let's kick off the interview. I guess can you tell us a bit about, kind of just to give people a bit of a context of why you're here, like your latest business card. Can you tell people kind of like where you're at now?
Okay, well, anyone who wants these would be a good souvenir, but Michael can read it has my latest job title.
Yes.
You could read that out.
It says Stuart Snyder, unemployed, lazy bum.
So, that's the ultimate success for entrepreneurs, isn't it? Where I'm at today, you want me to go where I'm at or where I started from?
Or just very quickly now, where you're at today, why are you an unemployed bum? What is the life of an unemployed bum look like?
Yeah,
you did some travel earlier. To me, it sounds like you get to do what you want to do.
Absolutely. And so YourAmigo was very successful, and I was a major shareholder. And I woke up one day and said I didn't need to work, and I'd been there 12 and a half years, and it was time to move on. I didn't find the challenge to be there anymore. And so my story is I retired April 2012. In May 2012, I went on a train from Beijing to Berlin. I like to travel, so I've been to 48 countries now. It is a sad but true story. I got back from this trip. My family didn't want to go with me. They're not travelers. My wife said our marriage is going nowhere, and I said, I'm glad you said that because I was going to tell you the same. But she's a lovely person, but it was time to move on there. And unfortunately for me, since January, my children don't talk to me. So in some ways, I was very successful. Personally, I have a few issues, but don't we all?
Yeah.
But what I really love doing is sharing my experience as an entrepreneur from Adelaide. I grew up in Silicon Valley, so it's in my blood. I came here 20 years ago, and
Can we talk about where it all started for you? So you grew up in Silicon Valley?
Okay, yeah. So where it started, as my brother said, it must have been an immaculate conception that conceived us because it couldn't have happened any other way. But that was a joke. Anyway, so I basically I went to high school in Silicon Valley. I got a little something. I actually grew up in Cupertino, California, which is the heart of Silicon Valley. There were apricot orchards there. So not much different from Adelaide. Silicon Valley was very similar to Adelaide 40 years ago. It was known for fruit canning, fruit packing. That was the #1 employer. But it also had defense industry like Lockheed, and it had couple good universities, Stanford especially, and UC Berkeley. And down there was where I went to school, was San Jose State, but that was the working man's school. But it all changed in my lifetime, and one of the reasons it changed is I like telling the story about I went to high school with a long-haired hippie, and his biological father was from Homs, Syria. You may not know that, but so I went to high school with Steve Jobs. And in high school, nobody would have ever guessed this guy was going to be great. I mean, he would have been the last person you would have thought was going to be the most successful business person.
Was he in your year?
Yes. Oh, so I have something here. For those who think I'm making this up, let's delete that. I brought my high school yearbook, and so I've got the pages marked where there's pictures of Steve Jobs. You can see what he was like in high school, but he was a very interesting guy in high school. He was different, but yeah, I think about times he had qualities in him that made him successful.
That's him there?
Yes. That's, yeah. So.
Was he an outgoing kind of?
No, not a, kind of like me, a kind of a loner in a way, but a hippie, a true hippie. And what I remember about him, he was a spiritual seeker like I was, and he was into Buddhism. He wanted to find nirvana, and we would talk about how to attain nirvana. And he thought taking drugs like LSD would help him expand his consciousness. And I didn't believe in drugs, and I told him I don't think it was real. But I was really curious to ask him what he experienced when he was on drugs. And one time I remember him saying he was going to stay awake 3 nights in a row to see what effect it would have on his mind. But that was who he was. He was into different things. He wasn't a great student. He had a 2.65 grade point average, which is half C's, half B's. I was a better student. He was a little more successful, but I'm still alive. But he was also very passionate about what he believed in, very confident, and you could see that in high school. So.
But you mentioned before he was a bit of a kind of like a loner, like
not in the mainstream. But
yeah.
He had some friends, but not popular. He didn't
yeah,
play
yeah. So it
sports.
wasn't the most popular kid at school.
Not at all.
Yeah, you wouldn't have picked it.
No.
So, like, were your mum and dad entrepreneurial? Where's the seed for Stuart Snyder's kind of entrepreneurial?
I would say I'm probably not 100% true entrepreneur, because there's part of me that worked for other people for many years.
Yeah.
But part of me didn't quite fit in either. So really, it came down to when I came to Adelaide 20 years ago. I worked with the brightest group of people I ever met in the defense company. Vastly superior than any I ever met in Silicon Valley. And having lived there, I knew there were a lot of mediocre people there in high positions because there's so many opportunities. And what I saw here is really bright people doing something like defense, which I don't think very much of, because there's no other opportunities. So I suggested we should start our own business. And for me, the reason, I think the major reason YourAmigo became successful, we had a fantastic team to begin with.
Yeah.
And really smart people, and creative, energetic, enthusiastic.
That's so, like, your mum and dad, like.
No, my dad, he worked kind of for Motorola, so he had a technical sort of background, and he did technical, like product literature, and he had his own a little advertising company. So it was not true entrepreneurial, and in those days too, and it didn't happen until after Apple became really successful that everyone started businesses there. But for me, it was too late. I had gotten an accounting degree.
Yeah.
So, but when I came here, I saw an opportunity to join a team that was really highly skilled.
Before that, like, so you did uni over in the States?
Yeah, so I went to San Jose State. I got a degree in accounting, and I started at KPMG in San Jose. That office, when I started in 1979, had 49 people. Today we have thousands of people working there. So to give you an idea, it was like Adelaide. 40 years ago, that was like what Adelaide is kind of today. It was a nice place to live, and housing was affordable then.
KPMG would probably have more than 50. So if anyone doesn't know, KPMG is one of the big 4 accounting firms in the world, like one of the biggest professional services firms in the world. Probably have a couple of hundred people here in town. I don't know, Chris, how many people?
About 100 people.
Well, there you go, 100 people. Just up here on Peary Street,
Yeah.
on a couple of floors.
Yeah, and so in Silicon Valley from 79 to 93, I did financial jobs in a number of all technology companies.
Yeah.
Medium, small size. I'm not a big company person, and maybe that's the part of me that fits into being in the entrepreneurial side. But you know, having said that, I could also fit into working in a company. But honestly, I think it was kind of boring jobs. I had a friend that worked at KPMG who, I knew a lot of people that worked at all these startup companies, and what would happen is they would work 60 and 70 hours a week, and then the company would go out of business. And I thought, oh, I don't want to work that hard. But anyways, I had a friend who did that. He did about 6 different companies, and then he worked in a startup, and I think sold his shares when Yahoo was worth $100 billion. Today it's maybe worth 20 billion or something. And he's part owner of the San Jose Sharks. So it does show persistence pays off. But in those days, well, that was after I left. I left before in 93. So that was more the hardware era, and hardware was very hard, and most companies didn't survive. Yeah, so it wasn't like, I was pre-boom era.
Is that like 93? Is there a recession at the end of the 80s here? Was the recession we had to have called the...
No, I brought the recession with me. So, it was a recessed economy in the U.S. I had actually had trouble selling my house in Silicon Valley, and I just let whoever wanted it buy it for cheap, and because I wanted to get married and move here.
So what brought you out here was your like soon-to-be wife.
Yes, and so my story is I met my wife on a bus trip from to Nepal to London in 1979. It was and before that I traveled through New Zealand and Australia. So after I graduated from San Jose State, I had 6 months traveling around the world, and I met my wife on this bus trip. I really liked her, but she wasn't interested in me. So we didn't get married until 93. It's a really long story, and I won't tell the whole story, but she's a lovely person. I still get along really well with her. But
So you met in Nepal?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right. And so she's from Adelaide?
She's lived here all her life, yeah, and she didn't want to move. And when I visited, I thought Adelaide was like Silicon Valley many years ago. It's just a great place to live. But I did find when I came here, not a very good job market. I came after the state bank disaster, and then in like 95, I was out of work for a year, and I had to do like, the only work I could find was 2 contracts in the government, and it drove me crazy. That's how you know if you're an entrepreneur. You know, you get a job in the government, and if you're not going crazy, you're probably not an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
But that was one of the reasons I also co-founded YourAmigo, because the job market here is not very good. I thought, well, I might as well give it a go, because I don't want to do any more of the jobs that are here.
What can I ask? What took you to Nepal?
I ran away from home when I was 19 and joined the Navy and started traveling. So I saw Hong Kong, Kenya, Philippines, Singapore, and I said, I like traveling. And so I had to work my way through university because no one else was supporting me, and I lived really cheaply. I saved all my money. And I saw there was an overland tour that went from Nepal to London, but also went down to the Middle East through to Syria and Israel and Egypt. And I said, I want to do this. And so an interesting story, Michael, is one of the guys I graduated with said, Stuart, you're going to be 6 months behind in your career. You know what you're doing? And so the first day I started at KPMG was his last day. He got fired. So it was a fantastic experience, and I'm so glad I did that.
Is that kind of still like the hippie train? Like people would come down from Europe and end up in Nepal. Is that similar, or did that take it off?
Unfortunately now, like you can't really go through Afghanistan unless you're really crazy. Pakistan's dangerous. We were in Iran 3 weeks before they took the U.S. hostages. So, but I found people are really friendly to Americans. So, yeah, Iranians. You're from Tehran, Isfahan?
Yes, it's there.
Tehran, okay. Our bus rolled over in the desert, and I was in Isfahan for 10 days.
Yes.
So, yeah, the people were really friendly.
Very cool.
Appreciate it.
And then so Adelaide, you chose Adelaide because
My wife lived
Yeah.
all her life, and she didn't want to live. I liked it. So, the thing is, people think, oh, Silicon Valley is just like paradise. It's almost the opposite. It's a great place to work, but not a great place to live. I mean, the housing's really expensive. It's crowded. Everyone's a transient. There's no community. You're stuck on the freeway for, so I don't miss it, and I'm glad I left, because I think the other thing is people were also very, very materialistic. They judged you by the car you drove, the house you owned, the job you did, and here people don't care.
we're a regional town, that's why. I caught a taxi the other night, and the guy is here. He got his PR, and all his family's and friends are in Melbourne, and he is just like doing his time here. Like he can't settle for 2 years back into Melbourne. He has to do his time, a couple of years in a regional town.
Well, I think it's a great place to raise a family. I do feel, though, jobs here were very limited opportunities for bright young people, which I understand we've lost. Stephen Marshall said 36,000 university grads in the last 10 years have gone interstate and overseas. I think it's disgraceful, I think it's shameful.
Yeah.
And so this is the one thing I think Adelaide can do is IT technology. And so from 20 years ago, when I first came here, that's what I wanted to do, is bring that Silicon Valley mindset here, because I thought we had the talent here. And that is the number one reason I wanted to do YourAmigo, also to prove it could be done out of Adelaide.
Cool. And you did it.
Well, the company was extremely profitable. It still is extremely profitable. It has no Australian customers. It all export. It is the world leader in automated search engine optimization. And it's still going, still very profitable. And I'm very proud it was still headquartered in Adelaide.
Very cool. So how did it all start? Can we start talking about YourAmigo?
Yeah. So I worked with the founder, Raman Coupe, who was way smarter than Steve Jobs, and more charismatic than Steve Jobs. He was the smartest, most charismatic person I ever met. And he was 30, and at the defense company, he took that from 0 to 55 people in 3 years, and we signed up $30 million in contracts, which for defense is very difficult because you're competing with large multinationals. And the CTO was brilliant, John Schutz. He was the highest matriculate in the state. And then later we got our sales and marketing manager, Gary Smith, who did a wonderful job. Also came from MRAD, which was the defense company. But what happened to the defense company was owned indirectly by the state government of South Australia, and when we signed up a $20 million contract, they had to get rid of the company because they had to guarantee that contract to the Commonwealth government. And this was after the state bank, so they got rid of it as quickly as they could, and then the management team went out, and it went from 55 people to 0 people in the next 4 years. So, but I met some great people there.
Yeah, so you met the other co-founders all
Yeah, so Raman was a founder along with, I eventually went to Alex Medical Laser. It's a listed company, local company. And I met Victor Previn, who was the other co-founder. We were looking for opportunities. And Raman was consulting at Flinders University. They had a search technology that could find stuff Google couldn't find, because it was hidden away in databases, and at the time Google couldn't find it. We thought that was really valuable.
What year is that?
That was 1999, so we were caught up in the dot-com hype, and so the plan was we would sell the company for $2 billion in 2 years. And that business plan didn't work out that way, but once the dot-com bust happened, we realized we had to produce a product. And the first product we produced was a search engine for searching within a website on the internet. And we sold to McGraw-Hill, Chicago Tribune, Honolulu Police. Could not sell with South Australian Police though. That's a sad thing. But it was a very competitive space. Google was coming up with an appliance, and the customers really couldn't tell how we were that much different from everyone else, even though we thought we were. So one day we were sitting together, and I suggested, why don't we make stuff visible to Google if we can find stuff Google couldn't find? And it started us in this whole other direction. And in the early days, Sony Europe was a customer because they had 60,000 products in the product database. Google couldn't find any of them. And they couldn't fix it themselves. They tried, they hired consultants who couldn't do it. They hired YourAmigo. Within 3 months, all 60,000 were in Google. We were getting paid 10 cents a click, and we were on our way. So that's how we got started in this whole new area. But today, Google can find everything pretty much, or the sites know how to make themselves visible. So we focus more on ranking all the products high for many different search phrases. And we did, our CTO came up with something really brilliant, where we would automatically create new content pages on popular search terms that they didn't have a page about previously. And that brought a massive amount of traffic to those companies.
Like going for the long tail.
Yeah,
kind of.
exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Very cool. But it took you a little while. How long from starting to the Sony Europe?
Okay, so, well...
Is that the 5 years that you mentioned?
Yeah, that happened earlier than that, but so we started in 1999, but we were loss-making until 2005, and the CEO did a perfect job of convincing local business people to put small amounts of money in, and every year we try and match it up with grants, and we ran really lean. We should have wrote the book because, when you have no money, you have to be that way, and we had to rely on ingenuity. And
what's like how lean? What were you?
Well, what happened is, okay, so we raised some capital, we did our development work, and then we weren't getting more money. We had to lay off a bunch of staff, technical people, and we were done, gradually started at building again.
Yeah.
But we were loss-making the first 5 years. It's extremely stressful because you don't know if this is going to work or not, but I think Sony came on board around 2003, 2004, and we were almost out of money, and I told the CEO we need to get venture capital, and he didn't believe, he thought they were all evil. So, anyways, I met some, and was right. But he was so charismatic. They went to a trade show in the US. He convinced two major Silicon Valley venture capitalists they were gave us a term sheet for $11 million US in 2005. And in those days, they never invested outside of Silicon Valley. You had to be within driving distance. But things were starting to change, and so they knew people were investing in India and China. Anyways, they came out here, and I found them to be, personally, I thought they were quite arrogant and disrespectful of our staff, because they would kind of say, oh, you know, how's that guy? And I said, oh, he's a good sales guy, but not the smartest person. They said, I'll get rid of him. And then they say, oh, your sales and marketing guy, how's he do? Can you see some of his marketing activities? Oh, doesn't have time for that. Oh, I'll get rid of him. And finally, they were going to get rid of our CEO. And at the same time, what happened is our UK sales rep signed up a very large customer because we had done some business with them before. And we were about ready to pack it in, and I said to the two co-founders, I said, you know, I think we can squeak by without these guys. And we did, and it took about 6 months before things started ramping up, and then it just took off, you know, and we never looked back.
So like, that sounds like some hard, really hard years.
It was very tough.
Like, what kept you going?
Well,
like, was it the team? You just, I can't imagine like just slogging it out, going. Was it the same office?
Yeah. You know, originally we were where Alex was for the first 2 years. And
yeah.
Moved a few years later, but really, the first 5 years, I remember every Christmas, I thought, I can't see how we're going to be in business in 6 months. And I was, you know, where most people enjoy their break, I'm just really stressed because we had taken money from other people. And our CEO had this belief, which I didn't really believe. He thought he would never get a job in Adelaide if he failed.
Yeah, right.
And I didn't believe that, but he had that view. And so it was basically...
So he, like, from his point of view, it had to work.
Well, I think so, but I think also the team were people who don't give up.
Yeah.
Because, you know, we put so much into this, we weren't going to give up. And if we failed, this is why I said we'd get rid of the venture capitalists. I'd rather fail ourselves than have them destroy the company. And we're so glad we did. I thought, well, we're going to give it everything we've got, and that's what we do.
But yeah, right. So like I'm just trying to, I'm thinking about my experience here in Majoran. Like just the number of times I just collapsed into bed, exhausted, and just like, why am I doing this? Like, I don't know what keeps me going apart from I don't want to go back.
Yeah, that's a really good question. Whether we have a mental problem, but actually, it is the most rewarding thing I've ever done in my life, other than my children who don't talk to me. I still love them, I was an accountant who worked in the back office, and I just crunched numbers, doing really boring jobs, and I didn't really go out and meeting some really interesting people and do interesting, and I wasn't stretched to use my brain. I just kind of did whatever. This stretched me in so many ways. I became such a better person.
Yeah.
That even if I failed, I would have done it. And I'm serious about that because I became a much more outgoing, confident person. And I learned a lot from our CEO because he had the skills I didn't have. He was charismatic. He could look you in the eye and say, yeah, invest $50,000, you're going to do really well. And I learned so much from someone who had different skills than I had. But I had some good skills. I had very strong analytical skills. and researching things, which is valuable. You need people with different skills. But
Yeah.
that's what kept me going, and that's what will keep you going. No matter what happens, you'll be a better person for this.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm.
Yeah, best decision to do this, like to start. Best decision.
Yeah, I can't comprehend how people do in Adelaide. They do the same job for 30 years. You get old and, have you, I don't know, you look back and are you happy that you did everything you could have achieved? And I couldn't do. That's the other reason I always wanted to start a company. So it's part of that growing up in Silicon Valley too.
Yeah, right. In your DNA.
There's, I guess, a bit of ego too to prove, we can do it. If he could, anybody could.
Was there ever like a class of, 72 reunion?
Oh, there was, in 1982, this is a true story. Tim doesn't like hearing this because he's heard it too many times.
So many times.
Close your ears, Tim. So, Steve Jobs comes up to me and he remembers who I am. And he says, "Stuart Snyder, how you doing?" And I go, "Great." And he goes, he's the CEO of Apple the first time. And he goes, "Well, what are you doing?" And I go, "Well, I'm unemployed." And he goes, "Man, I envy you. I wish I was doing that." So it made me feel I wasn't a loser. And the 20-year reunion didn't really have much to say to me, but he had a beautiful life.
Very cool. Okay, so first few years are really, really hard, and then
First 5 years for us.
Yeah, and Stuart Snyder is his brainwave that makes it all kind of click.
Oh, no.
Is that how?
No, that's not how
We've got to do external search, not intranet.
it was a real team effort. Everyone in the early years had a really valuable contribution. I think this is really important. What doesn't work if you have someone with a big ego who doesn't listen to other people? But in those early years, if a good idea came out, people would grab it. So we decided we are going to go in a new direction. We're going to make websites visible and do automated search engine optimization. But we were still stuck in this mind frame of we charge a license fee. But the CEO was very, very shrewd. He went talked to someone who was doing affiliate marketing in Ireland, and he said, "Oh, no, that's not the way to do it. You do charge per click. You have ongoing revenue." And so we changed our business model overnight, and that was one of the most important things we ever did, because now instead of getting paid once, we get paid continuing, and we sold it as very little upfront. It's paid per performance. That was very attractive to customers. And then our CTO came up with this brilliant approach of creating new content that drove lots of traffic to a site. So it was, and our sales guy was tremendous. He hired a fantastic team in the US. Not a huge team, but all these people, we were told you need $1 million to create an office. We said, "Oh, that's good. We'll just have them work out of their homes." And that's what we did. We had one in the US, one in the UK, and then every year we started adding. First year, the guy in the US didn't sell anything. The guy in the UK did really well. Later, the guy in the US became salesman of the year twice, and the guy in the UK it didn't work out. So you got to try different things. But it was a team effort, and that's what I think startups need, is a good team.
One of the things that just immediately pops into my mind is in those early days, how did you sort out who owned X amount of YourAmigo?
Well, at the very beginning, the three founders agreed, and then we went out raising capital from angel local business people who never really invested in a technology company but thought it was interesting. And
is that because of the hype that they'd seen the .com?
Partly, but we were post.com.
This is 2000 and...
Well, we started raising capital really 2000 and 2005.
Yeah, right.
So, but see, that's maybe the advantage of Adelaide. It's sort of isolated from what's going on in Silicon Valley. That people said, yeah, it sounds good, and yeah, I think technology companies can make money. Where over there, you know, we got criticized by our logo because they said, oh, that's too.com, YourAmigo. Oh, that's too, you know, it sounds like Mexican, that's really bad. And they're caught up in that world where over here none of that mattered, and it didn't matter to any of our customers. All they cared about was, can we make money for them?
Yeah.
You know?
Were there any kind of, like, in that dark period, like, you don't have to answer it, just in that dark period, like any disagreements and like...
Well, this is the interesting thing, is during the dark days, we were a really united team, and I think tough times brings people together, and you're fighting against it. It's like a war. You're in a war zone, and you're getting shot at, and you got to take the hill and without dying. And you all work really closely. And the sad thing is, one of the reasons maybe perhaps I left, at the end, the team just fell apart when we were successful. And I don't know how to explain that, but maybe we've been there too long, because I don't think a startup you're meant to be there 12 and a half years, but that's another reason I moved on.
That's very cool. That's cool. And then so I'm starting to think about YourAmigo starts to do really well, and like your strategy was trade shows, wasn't it? You didn't like, and your strategy wasn't so much like, because you were going after large.
Absolutely. So we had we didn't want a customer unless we thought we could make $10,000 a month. So and some people vastly more than that. So we had to go target them because they don't do a Google search. These big companies don't do a Google search and find out, you know, who ranked #1 on SEO, because we weren't even ranked. But because we were trying to sell, we'll get 40,000 keywords that we rank really high and get you a lot of traffic. Now those people are used to people calling on them. And sometimes they go to trade shows. So early days, that was a great way of meeting those people, and we also were speakers at the trade show. So you become a thought leader, and they think if you're speaking, you must be someone important. And the other thing that was very effective, and then later on what we did is we identified customers we wanted, but maybe they don't attend trade shows. So we paid a telemarketing guy to cold call, and he would get $500, $1,000 for every meeting he lined up. And that was very effective.
And so he was targeting US companies. Did you like target anyone in Australia at all?
Only in the early years, and we found it too hard for a couple of reasons. Is I think Australian companies aren't used to buying from small innovative companies, but the other thing was we had a performance model where we charge per click or revenue share, which meant there's 20 million people searching to buy stuff in Australia, 310 million people in the US. It takes the same amount of work to set up a site and to sell. Why not just go to the US and not worry about Australia? And that's what we did.
Yeah, deeper markets.
That's right, and even the UK was bigger than Australia, but even then, you could see sites didn't do quite as well as most sites, and it did not do quite as well as the US because it's just a huge market there.
One of the things that popped into my head is like the hype at the end of last century, so like the early
.com.
Yeah, the first .com boom, like that hype.
Yeah.
Do you see any of that kind of? Is there any kind of similarities to that period?
Yeah, there
as
is.
to what's happening now?
I'm really glad you asked, because I was thinking about this. What I think the similarities are today, it's not exactly the same, but Now you have the cost of doing a startup is really low. You know, when we started, you had to buy a bunch of computers and pay people and salespeople. Now you can sell over the internet. So the cost has gone down, but now you have like all these, especially in the US, angels and accelerators, and there's, you know, 100 different mobile apps doing almost the same thing, but maybe a little different. And what I think will happen, and so you don't need to raise venture capital as much in the US until maybe you're well established. And Atlassian, the Sydney company, is a good example. They didn't raise any capital for the first 6 years. And then when they wanted to really expand, they got a US venture capital firm. But I think there's probably too much punter's money going after bad deals. You know, when that happens, you'll see a fallout. It is a gambling mentality.
Yeah.
But when you have too much money going after every little startup, most of them will fail. And that was the problem in the dot-com boom in the US. You'd have $100 billion being invested every year in venture capital. And today it's only like 26 billion US. So just too much money being thrown around, and I think there is a bit of that globally, because now everyone in the world they figured it out that this is better than working for someone else.
Yeah.
You know, you could be an unemployed lazy bum.
Is it a bad thing?
Hmm.
Like, it's funny as well, like there's teams as well everywhere,
Yeah.
like all around the world now,
Yeah.
doing, like, so there'll be 100 teams doing that one app
Yeah.
in New York, another 100 teams in
Yeah.
the Valley doing it, but in Berlin and Israel as well. Like.
Absolutely. So that's a good thing, I think, is that, and this is what I believed when I came here 20 years ago, and people in the US didn't believe it because they believed you had to be within driving distance of their venture firm, and people here didn't believe it because they didn't see it. But I believe the geographic location makes less difference, and it's becoming more so. Having said that, you know, if you go to Silicon Valley, it's going to be easier to raise capital, easier to do deals with big companies. It's a bigger market in the US, but it's hard to find good people there. But yeah, I think there's lots of teams doing very similar stuff, and there will be a fallout, is a guess. But there will be some very successful companies.
Yeah. Okay, so moving the story along, I've got one other question, though, but I'll leave that one. Moving the story along, so you've exited, like, YourAmigo just blows up. Is there anything else to that story?
Oh, well, so we looked at listing on the London AIM Stock Exchange in 2008. We were just going like that. And in 2008, what happens? So timing is everything. And so in our case, the stock market crashed. And then we were looking at a trade sale of the company. So we looked at that very closely, and we were still going like that. And then we were very close to what I thought would have been a good deal, but some things happened and it didn't work out. And I thought, it's time for me to move on.
Yeah.
So, but the company has been, this is really rare, but the company is very, very profitable and paying out dividends. So all the investors have almost doubled money, and I've done very well. So,
Why London? Why not the NASDAQ?
a couple of reasons. Well, we looked at the ASX very early on, but ASX you cannot raise a lot of money. We were told maybe you can raise $3 million, and it's not a liquid market where people buy and sell. And when we met stockbrokers, none of them understood technology companies. In London, we could have raised maybe £20 million on the London AIM. They had analysts who understood technology companies. They had some listed. And the reason you don't go on the NASDAQ, it costs millions of dollars to list there. You've got to be really big and have a big presence in the US. And what we were told by one investment banking firm that had companies listed on the London AIM and the NASDAQ, that unless the value of the company was more than $300 million, that the liquidity or the buying and selling of shares was probably not much different on the NASDAQ than in the London AIM, and the valuations would be comparable. So
Yeah,
that was the main reason we were looking at that.
that's cool.
Yeah.
Okay, and then so you've left YourAmigo?
Yes, in April 2000.
Yeah, and so you've started to now invest in startups yourself?
Yes, so it's something I wanted to do, but also something I feel I should do, that people gave me a chance. And so I've invested in Happy Inspector. I thought it was a fantastic CEO, Jindu Lee. He's moved to San Francisco and he's doing really well. I've invested in another company called Portalog, which none of you have ever heard of, but remember that name. This would be $1 billion company. Again, I've known the CEO for many years. Great CEO, and they're solving a very complex problem that no one else does. And what I like was you've got 100 different social networking applications, probably 1,000. This is about the only one I see trying to solve this problem, connecting the suppliers with their retail distribution customers when they place purchase orders, that they're automatically connected to their inventory system, and there's no errors in the purchasing system, and it has a lot of benefits of you can create inventory-based websites for these small retail customers that don't have the ability to do that.
So you're a fan of P2P?
Absolutely, yeah. That you hit it on the nail, because I've also invested in Blackbird Ventures,
Yeah.
and I really like the founders there. Mickey Skiback will be South Start, but I mentioned them, and he said, yeah, D2D is where I think it's at, because it's easy to sell to a business if you can make money for them. I don't really understand consumers. I'm not a big consumer, so for some people that might be their thing, but I think it's very hard to sell to 1 million different people. It's much easier. And YourAmigo is like that. We sell to businesses. It's very easy to focus on a few larger companies than try to sell to millions of people.
And so what is your relationship with Blackbird?
So I'm it's called a limited partner, which mainly means I've invested in the company. And one of the reasons I wanted to invest also is they have a fantastic network. They're the who's who of successful Australian entrepreneurs. So the founders of Atlassian, are you all familiar with Atlassian? The two co-founders of Atlassian were on DRW's richest under 40 years old list, that they are worth $550 million each, but they're actually quite nice people. They're just normal people. And so I went to with Blackbird had a investor get together a few weeks ago, and it was at the Atlassian headquarters. And there's lots of people in Australia who migrated to Silicon Valley, had success there, and then now investors in Blackbird. So I thought it's a great network, and hopefully they'll do well.
I'm sure they will. They're an awesome team.
Yeah. Well, hopefully we'll get some Adelaide startups to get some investment there. And they also do StartMate, which I thought was, from what I understand, the best accelerator in Australia.
Yeah, like Jindo went through there.
That's right, and also part of that they take these guys to Silicon Valley for like a month or two to get into that culture, and that was incredibly valuable.
So Jindo went across to the valley.
Yes.
Do you reckon we need to? Like, is it like?
It depends on the individual and what they do. I think it would be a very wise thing to at least spend time there. CEO and head of sales spent 6 months living there. But it depends on what you do. Like with the Atlassian guys, most of what they did, they had no sales force. They sold purely online. So in that case, it's not as critical. But if you're selling to big companies there, then you probably need a better presence there. But YourAmigo did, and it was still headquartered in Adelaide. But we found trade shows, we used to go once a month, and it was once every other month. And when you go there, then you meet everybody along the way, and that was adequate.
So that, like, to me, that's a bit of a nice spot to kind of finish up, maybe open it up to some Q&A. I guess one other question that comes to my mind, like the freelancer listing, that Matt Barry listing, he wants to list freelancer.com on the ASX. Do you reckon that's, like, how do you reckon that would go? Like, have times changed?
I don't think so. Because I think, like, Atlassian will probably list on the NASDAQ or New York Stock Exchange.
Yeah.
Why he's listing here, I don't know. I've read a little bit about him, and it's kind of interesting. But he was, before that, he got $30 million of venture capital, and then the company failed, and he basically told the VCs, well, that they paid for his MBA. But look, there have been successful companies here like Soup.com.au, Motive, but they're all Australian companies, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
So it seems to me, if you're a global company, it depends on the size. Maybe his market cap isn't big enough to be on the NASDAQ. There wouldn't be enough interest.
Yeah.
So this is another way for him. I have no idea why he's thinking that way. I still don't think the stockbrokers here are sophisticated in understanding technology companies,
Really?
nor is there a lot of liquidity
In tech companies?
I don't think so. There's not enough people following it, because people here in Australia make money in mining. So if you're a mining startup, that's okay. You can be risky and fail because someone's made a lot of money in Poseidon, but tech doesn't have that track record yet. Maybe one day it will. But it seems to me, again, there are 23 million people here. If you could list in the U.S. with all the money there and a much higher valuation, you would.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And then I still think maybe the London aim was something in between the two. A little more money. There's a lot more money in London than there is here for technology.
Yeah. That's awesome, Stuart. That is all my questions for tonight. So we really wanted to thank you, like, hugely. It's been awesome.
Good. Well, thank you. I'm hoping that if this goes viral, that a Hollywood talent agent might discover the next feature film.
I'm sure.
Yeah, I need to.
I'm trying to spam you for the last 2 weeks, but you just
I will do that. I haven't done that because I'm an old guy, and usually old guys don't know how to do new things, but
text is too short.
But you're right. I always said when I was young, I want to learn how to do new things, so I will get a Twitter account because I need to keep up to date. But I am on Facebook and LinkedIn. So
You got a Tumblr?
no, I need to jumble.
Not yet. Does anyone in the audience have any questions for Stuart while he's still here?
Yeah. Stuart, you mentioned before that going through all this, that you really need ways to stretch your mind and to expand yourself and push yourself. What does that?
Don't do LSD though. That's what Steve.
Apart from that.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Okay.
So what are you doing now to stretch yourself?
Oh, good question. Yeah. I do struggle at times being a little bored, but I do. So I am investing in a couple of these companies. I'm doing a lot of mentoring. I get a lot out of the mentoring because I'm learning from each one who comes to me, and I steal a little bit of their energy because they're young and enthusiastic. So I do volunteer work also, which I always want to do things just to help people. So I do the spectrum. I do highly motivated entrepreneurs, and one of my volunteer jobs, I drive prisoners to job training and job interviews. So it keeps me balanced, and I want to do more in the mentoring entrepreneurial space. So that's been a little busier. So if anyone needs a mentor, my rates are really reasonable. It's free, so.
What about the prison bus?
What?
The prison bus?
The
Prison bus where you take
prison
Oh, I don't know. I drive the government car for that. So, yeah, but it's
That's amazing.
you know, I just want to
You need someone to get you to those meetings.
Unfortunately, in business, I've found business could be very negative. You're always fighting with people. You're fighting about money. And so what I want to do now is just do things that I think are positive that help people, and that's my reward. So I haven't made any money other than through my investments in the last year. I had, I think, $200 from lecturing at the university one day. So I'm,
Genuinely unemployed.
yeah,
Or
but keeping somewhat busy.
do you surf?
No, I don't know. I have no talent, so that's
That's what I always wanted to do.
that's right. I guess we became accountants because
Yeah,
you have no talent.
yeah. Yes. Defense. Does anyone else have any questions for Stuart?
I just got a question. There you go. You said that when I was talking to you, you said like you have to have the right people working with you and to build a company or to build where you want to go. How do you do that? Like, say for example, like we are a small business over here. If you want to move to the next level, like, do you do a lot of networking, or I mean, like, what sort of piece of advice can you give us?
Yeah.
To-
Oh, yeah.
I mean, to get to the right people or to
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, in network, yeah, one thing I learned from being a shy accountant, and I've learned this by observing our charismatic CFOs and other successful entrepreneurs, networking is absolutely critical. And I'll just share one thing, not only networking, but selling, the ability to sell yourself and the vision, and this is the Steve Jobs quality, is when you saw Steve Jobs, there was no doubt in his mind this was a revolutionary product that would change the world. And they say he had a reality distortion zone. If you were around him, you believed it. Whether it was true or not didn't matter, he believed it. And so if you're a very confident individual, so I would recommend everyone study, you know, body language and charisma so that people like you. You know, you smile at them, you look in their eyes, you use their name a lot. And you know, then people feel good about themselves, and that makes it easier to sell whatever you have. And seriously, I think half of what they should be teaching in entrepreneur class, and I've said this at the university I lectured, was, you know, how to sell, how to network. The other thing interesting about now, just quickly, is that there was a show that showed this guy at Harvard University is researching how many people, degrees of separation do you need before you can meet anyone in the world. And so he had a package that he had someone in a village in Kenya gave to someone they know, who was her aunt in Nairobi, who gave it to someone she knew in New York, who knew someone at Harvard, who knew this guy. And so this is how networks work, is what they find there are hubs where people know lots of people, and you want to connect into those people. So, you know, what we did at YourAmigo and what I'm trying to help, like Portalog, is say, these are the people you want to meet. Let's figure out who knows those people so you can meet them, and then you can be able to connect with them.
Thank you.
There one more question? Team.
Oh, this is a tough one.
No, that's really easy. So I'm just really curious. So you have this technology at Flinders University that potentially can find things that Google can't find. How did you manage to get that out of Flinders? Would they not have seen the opportunity themselves?
Oh, good question. When I first mentioned to the Vice Chancellor we're going to create jobs and wealth like they do in Silicon Valley, he looked at me and said, "We don't do that. We're Australians." And he lived in Iowa, and Americans wear funny T-shirts. We're not like that, but frankly, it was basically an idea. So it would have never gone anywhere, I guarantee it, if we didn't do anything with it. It was basically an idea, And we had to develop software all around that. Today, that aspect is not so valuable because people know how to make websites visible and Google knows how to find things better. But in those days, it was called the invisible web, and they said the huge early retailers in the US were completely invisible in the very early days, and we were the first to come up with a product that could make them visible. But that took several years.
Excellent. Anyone else?
What was your greatest or biggest failure, and what was the most valuable lesson you learned?
You know, that's an interesting question because I hear a lot of that, like people are taking pride in their failures, and I think you learn from your failures. But I would say this, I think the team and the early years executed brilliantly, and I think we made very, very few mistakes. And I think I attribute a lot of that to having experience. And so, you know, 45 is when I was a co-founder, and that's old age for an entrepreneur, but I think the advantages are you have a lot more experience, you might make less mistakes. So I can't think, to be honest, I don't know if too much we would have done different. I think we were naive going in, that, you know, we had this idea, that's all it was an idea that, gee, if you can find stuff Google couldn't find, well, that must be worth a lot of money. But, you know, look, you know, in the end, when we were looking at selling the company, we were going to sell that separately, our search engine that could find stuff that others couldn't find, but we couldn't get any interest because unless you had customers and sales, they weren't interested. That's how sophisticated even the U.S. companies are. I would say the one thing maybe we could have done better, what I found in looking at selling the company in the U.S., I think they will tend to look for more of probably a U.S. headquartered, a Delaware company, probably more people on the ground in the U.S. Because we were a small team with high revenue, high profit per person, but we didn't look big to them. So they would rather buy the U.S. venture company, that company that had 300 employees and had no profit, where we had very large profit. And we thought, oh, well, they would get it. But so the other thing is I was also told by someone from Goldman Sachs that companies are bought, not sold. And what that means is you have to develop relationships with potential buyers. You just don't knock on their door and say, here I am, come and buy us. They want to know you. So those are things maybe we could have done better, but not much else I think we would have done different.
Because you work in investments, mainly, like I guess like the investments you've worked in the past, like what range from like what would be your smallest investment that you've done? Because there's a big difference between like gaming applications to business applications.
Look, I've only invested in 2 local companies, and this basically is I've only seen 2 that I was really interested in investing in. So for me, I'd started at $100,000 because it's not worth. Because I really believed in these companies, and I thought it's not worth bothering with. And both these companies, I approached them to invest rather than them try to sell me. So again, I think it comes back to that question: as I see so many different companies trying to do similar stuff that I can't see. I don't understand how they're different, and I'm not, because it's my own money. I can't be like a venture. I have a limited amount I can do, and so I want to get them, hopefully get 100% right. I probably won't, but you know, venture capitalists are happy getting 1 out of 10, and they're using other people's money.
Yeah.
So I'm really, really fussy. But if I see some really bright team, I think the team is really important. I see too many 1-person, 2-people companies, and you're going to struggle. I think having a good, solid team is really valuable with different skills. You know, so.
As entrepreneurs, they usually come to a point of, dark night of soul. Dark night of soul, when you're really struggling and you are doubting about everything.
Yes.
Then you come to an aha moment. Did you experience something like that? A moment, aha moment.
Aha moment. That would be what would that mean? Like you suddenly have a flash of...
Yeah, that's it. That's the point.
No, I think this was a long grind. I would, everyone says, oh, go out and be an entrepreneur, it's fun, it's easy. And you can be an unemployed lazy bum. I try to tell university students that, but the reality is, for me, like the first 5 years were like war, it's fighting for survival. And that's exactly what the first 5 years was. And then it changed, all of a sudden we're doing well and I'm getting great dividends. And I don't know if that's an aha moment, but it was a big relief when we turned it around, and it felt really good that we achieved, because we put so much of ourselves into that, a lot of hard work. And, but everything is going to be a constant battle until you reach a certain level, and then once we were sort of an established company, then customers would come to us. It was much easier, So, but the early years very hard.
Maybe that will just wrap it up there, and I'm not sure if Stuart's going to stick around for a little bit, maybe a little bit longer, but we can all have another drink and catch up with everyone. So just let